In this final section of this first module, we turn our attention to the dominant theoretical frameworks that hinder the broader understanding and fair treatment of sexual and gender diversity of children and young people. 4 perspectives will be examined. Adultism, or an adult-centered perspective, heteronormativity, cisnormativity, endonormativity. Being sexually or gender diverse represents different things for different people based on their context, experience, and, perhaps more importantly, the way in which their gender expression or gender identity and sexual diversity intersects with other categories of belonging. It is not the same to be an LGBTI plus person if you are racialized, unemployed, educated, single, non-monogamous, able-bodied, or old. For example, age and ageist-related experiences across the life course introduce greater complexity in the way children and young people are perceived and represented, as well as self-perceive and self-represent themselves. Each person is born in an already heavily sexualized and gendered environment. In fact, gender and sexual-related expectations precede the moment of birth. In other words, one is already ascribed a gender-based restrictive role even before birth. If sex and gender are constitutive elements of human experience, children should be able to actively join the production of narratives and representations about themselves in a welcoming and safe environment. Thanks to Foucault, we've learned that power relationships always involve exercises of resistance. Despite the weight of gender and sexual-based norms, there are children and young people who resist these norms, often because their embodied identity or expression cannot adhere to such a strict mandate. In a strongly LGBTI-phobic environment, deviating from the norm can have violent consequences for children and young people, and it can also lead to freedom and well-being. In this presentation, we wish to focus on gender or sexually diverse children or young people and ask ourselves the extent to which adult-centered perspectives have protected or harmed the LGBTI plus child's best interest. In 1978, James Flasher defined adultism as an abuse of power by adults towards children. In his words, abuse by adults in general of the greater power they have over any and all children. In some ways, these behaviors of adults resemble some of those exhibited by some adults towards other adults of lesser power that is referred to as racism, sexism, elitism, etc. Seeing others as so different that they constitute a separate species is a way of contriving reality in order to gain unfair power over them. I have chosen to refer to such behavior of adults towards children as adultism. When the views of children and young people are not taken into consideration, their narratives and subjectivities regarding gender, sexuality, and gender expression are missing. With that absence comes loss and misunderstanding. When not given the possibility, children will most likely hide and lie about their true feelings, emotions, and experiences in order to avoid potential conflict with adults who matter to them. For instance, parents, teachers, and so on. Normativity is constructed by adults and imposed on children to discipline them in strict and binary gender roles, ensuring children's unquestioning obedience to these social norms. It is important to remind ourselves that gender-based norms that do not welcome diversity echo discrimination and violence. One important example is conversion therapy, whereby unethical health professionals conduct procedures to enforce heterosexuality on LGBTI plus children and young people. Conversion therapy is increasingly outlawed as a recognized form of torture. Heteronormativity, cisnormativity, and endonormativity are cultural and social practices according to which men and women are led to believe that heterosexual, cisgender, and endosex are the only normal, healthy, or natural sexuality, gender, and sex characteristics, respectively. It is because of hetero, cis, and endonormativity that most people assume that others are heterosexual, cisgender, and endosex. And this leads to the production and reproduction of discrimination and violence across the life course. These normativities are often unwritten cultural assumptions that precede and outlive discriminatory legal frameworks. The power of heteronormativity and similar practices make the process of coming out particularly challenging. Coming out is the process of realizing, accepting, and revealing oneself as a lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or intersex person. Coming out is never just a one-off event. It calls for reaffirmation and repetition as the default dominant assumption that everyone is heterosexual, cisgender, or endosex until proven otherwise. On account of heteronormativity, cisnormativity, and endonormativity, LGBTI plus people are required to come out several times during their lifetime to different people, e.g., colleagues, new friends, extended family, neighbors, medical doctors, and so on. When the experiences and discourses produced by LGBTI plus children and young people are not taken into account, we tend to reproduce a rather homogeneous idea of what it means to live as a child or as a young person. This common projection about children is invariably based on a straight, cis, and endosexist matrix. However, reality demonstrates that many children and young people are challenging these normative assumptions across the globe. Their experience is often dismissed, undermined, and silenced due to power relations that automatically give moral authority to adults. In this final presentation, you've learned that adultism exposes children and young people to further vulnerability, namely with regard to sexual and gender diversity. Promoting social awareness and fostering collective responsibility is, therefore, imperative so that, as adults, we become allies of LGBTI plus children and young people rather than enemies of diversity. There are a variety of respectful ways to refer to sexual and gender diversity in children and young people. In order to move away from adultism, some perspectives on addressing gender diversity in childhood prefer talking about gender creative, gender expansive, or gender non-conforming children instead of using the expression trans children. Remember that the most important definition is self-definition. Words, just like ideas and experiences, are best described as works in progress, always evolving and reconfiguring themselves. Like any other topic, the most important thing is to remain curious and interested, as well as willing to get better informed. If the starting point for learning is questioning, then the next step, and certainly the most useful tool for educating ourselves, is reading.